Good morning, everyone. And all right, we have to introduce ourselves. I'm Carl Holtman. I'm the executive director here at Hokyoji, and it's my pleasure to host our last talk of 2023. Um, we got Christmas and New Year's, and we won't have anything until January 7th. So we'll have more of that later. Our speaker today, I've got the information here, Reverend Jushin Stephyn Butcher, chair of our board of directors for the time. He started his Buddhist journey over 25 years ago in the Tibetan tradition. He found his way to Hokyoji, where he became a student of Reverend Dokai Georgesen. Jushin received jukai in 2013 and ordination in 2017. He is currently Hokyoji's board president. He hosts a sitting group on the banks of the Choptank River in Cambridge, Maryland, where he resides with his husband, dog, chickens, and garden. And he's also an instructor at the university in artificial intelligence, among other things. So, welcome, Jushin.
Thank you, Carl. Yeah, so my gardening currently well, that's the wrong way. I always forget these are reversed. My gardening is currently limited to my indoor little tiny hydroponics. I have little tiny bok choy growing behind me, like 6 of them. It'll be one meal in another month.
There you
But
go.
It's still fun for the winter months to do a little bit of gardening. We were kind of spoiled this year. I had nasturtiums and marigolds and everything right up until December 1st. And then it started to get cold and they all died. But good morning, everyone. And I actually, so I'm not going to talk about artificial intelligence this morning, but the talk was actually partially inspired by a book that I had my class in advanced artificial intelligence read this last semester, which is Guy Claxton's Intelligence in the Flesh: Why Your Mind Needs the Body More Than It Thinks. This is actually kind of part of a theme of a few talks I've given over, I think this year, although it does all kind of run together. A while back, I gave a talk that was pretty much well centered on Robert Sapolsky's research, and he gives a really interesting talk on YouTube, which is basically he talks about the present moment, and there's some sort of altercation. Somebody has a gun, and they pull the trigger, and he backs up that instant to the last 10,000 years plus of all the causes and conditions that came to that event, whether it's in that moment, the up or down regulation of the neofrontal cortex versus the amygdala, how they were raised and whether and how that affected the regulation of their amygdala and impulse control, the neofrontal cortex. How that was affected is our sort of being tribal, social great apes, and how sort of in our, DNA expressed through DNA and other systems, hormones and other things, how we view status, how we express status, and all these things going back. So it's really, really a wonderful video because it talks about things that we might not think of as causes and conditions leading up to that. So what I really thought about, so I had the class read Claxton's book, and it was interesting because, of course, artificial intelligence is in the news. We have ChatGPT and so the so-called generative models. Everyone's talking about Gen AI. the word of the year is hallucination. And, we're talking about Chat GPT hallucinating. It doesn't hallucinate. That's a really bad way of describing what it does. But that would be way far beyond Dharma talk. So, but what I really wanted to sort of the class to start to think about is how sort of visceral our knowledge is, and how much, I guess, maybe somatic is a good word to think about it. I want to read something from his book here. And so I really have got to start buying paper books again because it's really hard to go through. It's hard to go through electronic books. So in artificial intelligence, there is this problem. There's a number of problems, but one of the problems is called the symbol grounding problem. So you see the symbol for the word tiger, and the question becomes, how does that get grounded as an experience, knowledge, or whatever of a tiger? Like, how do we connect the symbol with the experience? When I say tiger, everybody has an idea. Even if you haven't been to the zoo, you may have seen one on a video. Maybe you saw, what is it, The Life of Pi, and you saw a CGI tiger, and maybe you have cats, and you kind of know that a tiger is sort of the wild, larger version of a cat. And so this is the symbol grounding problem. And there's certainly GPT models have that problem because they're just language models. So speaking of us, then Claxton says, so neuroimaging studies have shown that words like chair are represented in the maturing brain not as a neat cortical dictionary. So we don't have like there's not some sort of dictionary in our brain that we look up words in, but in terms of widespread loops of interconnected neurons that knit together the muscle patterns you use to say the word, the perceptual processes you use to recognize it, what most chairs have in common, what various kinds of chairs look like, what you use them for, how a chair relates to throne and hammock, and some memories of special chairs like granddad's favorite armchair, which you personally encountered. Just seeing the word chair primes the brain that controls sitting down. So when you see the word chair, say the word chair, all of that is going on at the same. All of it is just activated, but we're not aware of it. And so that's really kind of the part that I wanted to talk about this morning, because there's a lot, and it kind of goes back to so in certainly in Western philosophy, most of us are familiar with sort of the mind-body duality, and it's most famously expressed by Descartes, who says, "I think, therefore I am." Somebody once quipped that all that really means is I think, therefore I am thinking. But it's a longer tradition, certainly in the Western philosophy, beginning even with the Greeks and the Romans, where the body is sort of put down. It's put at a lower level. The mind is higher. We have these ideas, we have even in Greek times, you're talking about the body is, dirty and it fails you. And, you see bits of this even in Stoic philosophy and things where, rationality and the mind are given a certain privilege over the body and all of that. And this continues in Christianity, where certainly the spirit is given, the body is an instrument of sin. The spirit and mind is put on a pedestal. It exists to a certain slightly lesser but certain extent in Islam. It was interesting. He was saying that actually Judaism is an exception. For some reason they didn't. And there have been, it's really funny when you hear it talking, people have been like, there have been counter movements to it. Maybe I'm going to be talking about a counter movement today where there was like little pockets, and one of them was called, there was a muscular Christianity movement. And it was sort of more of a pedagogy for bringing the mind and body and spirit back in a line. And you were, essentially you were going to pray and pump iron. But to whatever extent they were pumping iron, and I think like the 1800s, 1800s, 1900s. And it's so funny because it made me think of Lama Tse. So I'm getting in my head. So we have basically the same thing in the Buddhist tradition. So certainly in the early tradition, we are asked to meditate on how gross we are, all the gross fluids and the sinews and the bones, and how you're just going to end up on the charnel ground heap with vultures picking out your eyes, and that's sort of that's something you have to look forward to. I don't know what it's like. Yeah, this is how it all ends. But there's an elevation also then of mind. You have like, and there is dispute about what they were actually saying, but certainly in the common parlance, we have mind only. And the mind only school, Yogacara, and then it goes into, was it Huanyan philosophy? And then you certainly people who are much more interested, I think, in, like quantum mechanics and panpsychism, and the mind's gotten a little out of control. When I wanted this story, and it reminded me, I was reminded of it this morning. At the Tibetan, at His Holiness Pema Rinpoche's retreat center in McDonough, New York, upstate New York, the one of the monks that ran it, Lama Tsewang, he was like, I'm not going to be one of those monks, and so he had a weight bench, and so we used to jokingly call him Buff Monk, because he was going to do meditation and work on his body and everything. And it just reminded me of Dozen the other day. It's like, oh my gosh, that's Buff Monk. So it was funny. It's like, oh yeah, I see this again. So we sort of even have it in the Buddhist view. There is certainly a denigration of the flesh. Yeah, it's not quite the same thing as sin, but it's kind of keeping us attached to and samsara. But the interesting thing, and so I want to reorient it just a little bit. This also comes out of a book by Daniel Z. Lieberman called Spellbound. So when I went to the last board retreat, when I travel, because I work at home now. When I used to travel, I used to listen to podcasts when I commuted. Now I only listen to podcasts when I travel. So when I travel, you end up with layovers, and I listen to these podcasts. And I'm a fairly straightforward, rational person, probably materialist. And I was listening to this podcast, and they had Daniel Lieberman on. He was talking about his book Spellbound. And as he was telling his story of sort of the structure of the brain / experience, I was really, really intrigued. So the basic idea is this. And so not only is it a mind-body duality, there is a mental duality between what we are consciously aware of and what we are unconsciously aware of. We kind of think of the unconscious, but I don't think we really understand its magnitude. So just to give you an example of basically sort of the ego I. So ego in Latin just means I. So it's just when we say the ego, it's just like the I. The sense we have of a mini me who's up there in a control booth running everything. We have cartoons like that. And so that ego, for one thing, it processes things only serially. It can do about 6 bits per second of information. So it's about 8 words, because we actually see words as entire symbols. So that's about 8 words a second. The subconscious processes in parallel 11 million bits per second. And that's all going on under our, the radar. I'm just like, so we have this perception of being like, yeah, I'm me, and I'm having this thought, and I'm thinking about what I'm going to say, or I'm listening to what he's saying, and thoughts come up, and it's like, well, this connects and this connects, and we all, as long as it's within thought, that is what we perceive, or thought or feeling, that's what we perceive to be us in our experience. But looked at it a different way, that's only about 5% of brain activity. The other 95% is everything else going on, including thoughts. So there's thoughts going on that you're not aware you're thinking. And there's this great, so I'm going to read this, and I want you to tell me if this reminds you of anything. Let me see if I can find it. So this is the way he starts out a chapter. This is Lieberman. That annoying song was going through Jane's head again. She hadn't heard it in years. Now she couldn't stop humming it. As she made her way down the sidewalk toward her office, a woman coming in the opposite direction smiled at her, and her mood lifted. She walked on, and as she passed a coffee shop, a pang of hunger reminded her that she needed to get her blood drawn. Her doctor had told her not to eat or drink for 12 hours prior to the blood draw, so she had skipped breakfast. It was her second attempt this week. Yesterday, she had gotten halfway through a muffin before remembering the blood test. Even today, she felt tempted to stop at the coffee shop for a bagel. As she kept walking, she noticed a growing feeling of anxiety. She searched her memory for a possible cause and remembered she had a meeting with an angry client later that morning. It wasn't her fault the order had gone out late, but she was the one who had to make the apology. A moment later, the worried expression on her face cleared as she thought of a good way to smooth things over. So, as Lieberman notes, the song, the lift in mood, the hunger, the blood test memory, the temptation to eat, anxiety over the meeting, and the solution to her difficulties, all of them came from her mind, but none of them came unbidden. All of them came unbidden. That is, she didn't choose to experience any of them. Moods, memories, and inspiration are all outside our conscious control. They're visitors that drop by unexpectedly, sometimes welcome, sometimes not. But she didn't summon them. So who did? And so, and he goes, and there's a whole book that follows that. But I'm sure maybe I have, at least I will speak for myself, might have had that experience during Zazen. That you're sitting in Zazen, especially if you have a role, especially if you're Tenzo or Ino, and you're going like, oh, I gotta do this and that, and this person's leaving early, and gosh, did anybody really like breakfast? And it's this strange thing. I've talked before about the idea that certainly the idea certainly in Soto Zen of Zazen being goalless sort of matches sort of in a brilliantly accidental way. It matches with it matches the cure matches the disease or the thing is in that goal-oriented behavior puts us on a hedonic treadmill. So the hedonic treadmill is basically we have this anticipation. We want to buy a new coat or something, and we save up for it, and we look at it, and you know, sort of a new car, or not a new car, well, or a new car. It happens as well, but it was a side thought. But you know, we're thinking of colors. Is it the right coat? Can I use it all season? Oh, it has a liner I can take out, and we have all this anticipation that builds up on it. And then you know, you save the money and you have this excitement. You can actually buy the coat, and then you get the coat, and it's exciting for a week, and then it's just the coat you have. Like all of that buildup is gone, and that's the hedonic treadmill. And that's sort of it's a sort of it's just this fascinating for people who are not thinking in those terms, the idea that actually it's funny, it's actually in a koan. I think it's when the sixth patriarch is being hounded, is being chased, and the monk who was formerly a general catches up with him, and he says, you know, what's the secret? What's the teaching? And he says what it is, and then the general says, is that it? Is there not anything more? And that's what the hedonic treadmill is. It's like, so even if you have some sort of, you know, we don't talk about experiences so much in Soto, but even if you had one, you would have become inured to it. And then you end up in a problem of, am I going to have it again? Am I going to have a better one? Was that really the thing? So it's better to just stay out of goal-oriented behavior. And it's this strange thing where the lesson to be learned is itself the obstacle to learning the lesson. And that's how I felt sort of with this whole idea of, I thought I was going to title the talk, What Do You Sit With When You Sit? And again, we have this idea and we come to the cushion and we bow, and it's all of our conscious awareness. But when you sit down and you just sit, and all of this stuff starts bubbling up and happening, and it's just you becoming more aware of how it all really works, but we sort of can get upset at that. Like we think when we see that happening, we think that the zazen is not working, right? But that's the point. That's the point of doing it. And so if you get upset at that, you're getting upset at the thing you're supposed to be learning about. Like, and then it becomes like, well, I don't want to do that because I don't do it, you know, and it's boring, and it, you know, it's not giving me what I want. And that goes back to not having goal-oriented behavior. And you're just trying to settle in, because I'm not a big fan of panpsychism, but there is sort of this idea of, when you talk about, you know, a bigger mind, is just being more aware of your subconscious, and the less of the more of the other 95% that's going on, even though we can't really, you know, we can see its effects. Things bubble up. It's a great thing because we do. I like these quotes, are so good. Let me see. I have another one because I think they apply to sort of the way we. Sometimes I think the way we think about Buddhist practice and Zazen. So this is from Claxton's book. These are metaphors for consciousness. And I'm sure at one point or another, all of us have sort of had these sorts of things. So for some people, consciousness is kind of a brightly lit chamber, a theatrical stage in the mind, and conscious experience is all that happens on that stage in any moment. Some cognitive psychologists have associated this chamber of consciousness with constructs such as working memory and a central executive. in which case the stage becomes a workshop where processes are applied to the contents. This metaphor invites one to think about alternative dark regions of the mental theater. Something just came on. I'm not sure what it is. Of the mental theater where the same contents, props, actors, and so on may exist and may carry on functioning, but are out of sight of the viewer, the eye. So this is kind of the metaphor where we're talking about. This kind of a Freudian kind of thing where we have the stage and then there's these other things in the dark corners. So the eye becomes a combination of stage director and audience member. So I don't know if anyone's had that particular perception of what you think is going on. If the actors start to behave badly, the eye can also be a censor, banishing or repressing lewd or disgraceful performances from appearing on the stage. The Freudian image of the subconscious is the dangerous material incarcerated in a particularly dark place in the mind, which constantly has to be kept out of sight by such a censor. Sometimes this material seems to be alive, to have a will of its own, constantly threatening to erupt unbidden into consciousness, grabbing the mind's steering wheel and coming out with the embarrassing Freudian slip. Alternatively, consciousness can be seen as a screen, sometimes a display panel or a dashboard in the mind in which certain information, the contents of conscious experience, can be posted. The viewer of this information might, again, be the first person eye, or in the case of Bernard Barr's global workspace theory, might be other processing modules of the mind, not necessarily conscious, which can pick up on the posted information, contribute their own expertise or perspective. The eye could be seen as an operational manager, watching the activity on the screen and pressing the keys to determine future processing. And it goes on, or the consciousness is like a roving spotlight. So we have all of these metaphors I think we use, and I think we tend to, even though we talk about not I in Buddhism, no self or not self, we still tend to have sort of a lot of these different views. And it's not completely surprising given the sort of historical unfolding and all of that. But Claxton has a different metaphor for consciousness, which is that it is an unfurling. So, or an unfolding or a welling up. So you have the whole brain and whole mental activity, and there are bits and pieces of information coming in about which we are not consciously aware, and they cause reactions. And those are bubbling in and around, and eventually they unfurl and fold into conscious awareness and into, activity and thought and all of those sorts of things. And I think that's just a wonderful way to sort of, be a little bit more ease with sitting, is just like, we're just going to watch the unfolding. And sort of discard a lot more of these, which I think are, they're obviously not there because of Descartes, but there are sort of Cartesian like ideas, I think, in Buddhism, which actually cause problems in some areas. And I think that it makes it a little bit more spacious to sit. So, we just, and it is kind of the hard thing about it is that, as I say, the lesson that we might get from Zazen is the very thing that might prevent us from sitting. So that's what I got today for you. Is don't be so hard on yourself, because there ain't one. It is not under your control. So little of it is under your control. All right. So, and there's all kinds of like other parts about relating to your body and physical practice and things, I think. So any discussion, comments? Contrary opinions? Anyone else believe they're a ghost in a meat suit? Yes, Carl.
Excuse me. Um, this you were talking about, 95% of what's going on in your brain is not on the conscious level.
Yeah.
Yep. And it reminds me of a book we studied way back in the day with one of my favorite titles called Thoughts Without a Thinker. And I mean, that's very concise. We're not thinking, but we got thoughts going all over the place, but we're not directing those thoughts. So, anyway, uh, I think that that's a very interesting concept, and I found it to be quite helpful in zazen. Well, that's just the way the mind goes. But you know, um, there are in zazen. What I've been taught is that you have two obligations in zazen. So one is trying to focus your attention on whatever, whether it's your breath or whether it's the thoughts arising or shikantaza or whatever. But you're asked to focus your attention on what's going on. And then the second part is that when your mind inevitably drifts away from focusing on what's going on, that as soon as you realize that, you go back and you don't indulge in the, what Timbercat called Zen movies, so you could just go off into fantasy land. But the other thing you were talking about, the body being connected to the brain, and there is a practice, Kayanopasana, which is a meditation on the body. And the thing about that I found very helpful, with my wandering mind in zazen, is that the body is always in the present moment. It's never in the past. It's never in the future. And so being able to bring my attention to the body got me out of the thoughts without a thinker kind of thing. It was quite stabilizing. And of course, there's a lot of research going on the gut brain and how, connected. And there's also research that people who have had heart transfers don't have the same connection that people do with their original heart. There's been some studies on that. I don't know. It's all, the body is, it's perplexing, but wondrous. So anyway, those are just a few of my comments there. So thanks.
Yeah, no, yeah. So Go, I really like he's he comes out of Taiwan, and he's basically in the, what is it, Chaodong? I always forget how to pronounce the Mandarin version of Soto. And he doesn't do it so much anymore. I liked his original instructions, but his original instructions do really focus on the sitting first. Like, it's like sit, and he even says do a body scan to be relaxed, that actually distraction comes from being tense. And so you need to relax first. He's really big on post meditation massage and sort of getting the circulation back going before. It's a little bit more energetic work than I think we're used to in what came through Japan. There's a joke that that Zen is yoga with one posture. And it's just, you just sit. That's it. I think one interesting aspect of that is, and I don't know, I was kind of talking about this with Dozen at the end of the board retreat. The sort of gross simplification was that Soto was farmer Zen and Rinzai was samurai Zen for the upper classes. But if you look at it from socioeconomic point of view, where you have farmers are really, really physical and they're working all day long, and they're really working with their bodies, And it would sort of make sense in that way versus sort of maybe the upper classes who weren't working with their bodies as much. I think I mentioned before, I used to take Tai Chi when I worked downtown in DC, and they would not teach you meditation until you had been practicing Tai Chi for several years, with the basic idea of this is a really simplistic way of putting it, is if you can't control your body, how can you control your mind? More of it's like just, you need to be more embodied before you can do good meditation, even though we don't talk about that. Anyone else? Jan, Rushin.
Whoever. I've been thinking along the same lines for some time. So one of the things that has come up in this that's relevant to this is what Mel Weitzman put on the back of Kathy Fisher's Rakasu of when a fish enters the flowing stream, everything is provided. So it's like you've got everything you need, right? You don't have to have this goal orientation. Everything's just going to come up by itself. And then there's the koan that I'm going to start looking at pretty soon about medicine and sickness annihilate one another. It's the same kind of thing. It's like, this is going to take care of itself in some ways. And then there's another theme that I've been on for some time that John Donne talks about with this guided meditation of effort. He says, are you conscious? And then you have to answer that. And he says, is there effort involved in you being conscious? And it's like, well, no, there's really no effort. Can you make yourself more conscious? You can try, but you can't make yourself more conscious. You can maybe make yourself less conscious, but you can't make yourself more conscious. So there is all this stuff that comes up unbidden, and it's the less you struggle with that, the more pleasant the experience. So when I was going through, so grief is a good example of this. It's like an awful lot of stuff comes up completely unbidden. You're just overwhelmed, and what are you going to do about it? You're just gonna. So the quote that got me through a lot of that was from this song by Kelly Joe Phelps about throw the stick and let the bulldog run. It's just let it happen. Let you engage, and then you just let it happen. And so this last retreat, Rahatsu, I had a lot of resistance going in. So my strategy for getting rid of the resistance was exactly this. I'm not sure I want to be here, but now that I'm here, let's just do this. And it actually worked out pretty well. I mean, even better than a lot of times when I've been more goal oriented. So I'm on the same page. I'm on the same page with all this. So thank you.
Yeah, what was that? Lot Kelly has an interesting prompt. I don't know if we talked about it, anybody who went to Rice's retreat a month and a half ago. It seems like eons ago, but it wasn't really that long. What would it be like if you had no problem to solve? I was like, what would it be like? There are no problems, no problem. And then it sort of makes you aware of how many problems you're trying to solve in any given moment. Anyone else?
Well, and you actually look for problems.
Yeah.
You start to get bored. You start to think, well, what else can I do? What else can I come up with? What else is there to do? And so I think that's part of the deal is the engagement with life is looking for things to do, looking for problems to solve. So.
Mhm.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. This is fascinating stuff. As it so happens, just I guess last week I started listening to Stanford and Sapolsky's like human behavior series from 2010. It's mind-blowing, really. Like several months ago, I heard Yuval Noah Harari, who's a historian, kind of philosopher, and he's a longtime Vipassana practitioner, talk about every thought that you have that you're aware of or not aware of has some type of correlation to a sensation in your body. And that just kind of opened things up for me. It's like all the things that are happening under the hood, it's completely related to what's going on in this thing that's moving about in the world in some way. And at one point in time in the 80s, there was weightlifting for Jesus. Like that was a big thing where guys would go on these big tours and lift these huge weights and like do it in a praise type of frame thing, which was very 80s and very interesting. um, I completely agree with Zazen being a physical practice. I think Gudo Nishijima in maybe To Meet the Real Dragon talked about the form of sitting being a sort of yoga with one posture. I don't think he used those exact words, but that's kind of what I took from it. And it took a practice of a consistent, dedicated physical practice of yoga to really be intrigued by a sitting practice of meditation. And I think being in Sesshin for a multiple day event, you can definitely see that this practice is a physical practice because everything hurts on day 2. And then day 3 and 4, it's just like that's just part of the scenery. So I think, I really appreciate this talk. Thank you.
Yeah, Nishijima Roshi's big thing is that Zazen balances the central nerve, the CNS, central nervous system. Yeah, so he was really big on that. I think I think we even need to, and it's so hard because, for whatever, we have these linguistic fictions of an I because apparently all sentences need subjects. To where it's like, and that sort of is Claxton's thesis, is that intelligence is built into our opposable thumb, and the fact that the opposable thumb is this long and not longer or shorter. There is I forget, there's a bubble around you in which your brain, generally speaking, considers things in that bubble to be part of you. So our tool using is just an extension of ourselves. And so I mean, it's a losing battle, but kind of everything is a body mind. There's just a body mind. You just say it really fast.
Yeah. Bo and I had this conversation not too long ago about it's like the extended self, and I forget whose kind of whose thing that is, who's a current philosopher, but even the phones that we use now, our devices, are becoming part of our extended self, and this whole web of information that's out there on the internet, we're actually kind of starting to what's the right word? Envelop that into our being extended parts of ourselves. Yeah, it's wild stuff, man.
It's
The body.
Harari. It was Yuval Harari. Yeah. That's immediately what I thought of when he mentioned his name was that like he says we're actually already becoming cyborgs and it's an interesting progression because we talk about the Pali Canon, and it's like, oh, I mean, even by the 100 AD, they're saying like, well, there's no way this could be the original words of the Buddha. but there was a tradition, there was an oral tradition with, basically checksums and everything where they memorized huge texts. And there have been studies where groups who had, I guess they had both started with the same text and were somehow separated, and then they got them like 500 years later, and there were very small changes in between. And so we just think that's mind-boggling. But those of us of a certain age, like, we probably still remember our family home phone number. And you used to be able to just, like, in fact, I remember mine with the original area code because that's how I remember it. I always have to remember what the new area code is. And now it's just mind-boggling that we don't remember phone. Like, I don't remember phone. I don't know whose anybody's phone number is anymore. I have to go to my phone to do it. And that's actually there's a little bit of research that's done is that we're more and more, we don't remember things, we remember how to look them up. And it's just sort of a natural technological progression. I think the whole thing is fascinating, and it's kind of interesting because for some bizarre reason it relates to both Zen and artificial intelligence. But research has shown that it's much better to take notes with pen and paper than typing on a computer. There's something about the physical activity that makes note taking better that way. Anyone else? That's your odd factoid for the day.
I can't believe I still remember part of the Canterbury Tales.
The one that sticks with me is we did Macbeth. If it twere done when twere done, when twere well, it were done quickly. If the assassination can trammel up the consequence and catch with his surcease success, then doth this blow. Might be the be all and the end all here. What's yours, Rushin?
Oh, there's jokes going around that people can remember lyrics to songs from their teenage years, but they can't remember why they went in the kitchen.
Yes. Yeah.
Happens at a certain age. But you brought up Tai Chi, and I took Tai Chi for a while because my wife was really into more of the body energy stuff. And the teacher, Marilyn Elyson, she was just a brilliant teacher. She could tell if I had sat sesshin that weekend.
Yeah.
Every time. And it didn't feel any different to me, but she could tell just by looking that something was different. So there was a different relationship to the body. And every year about this time, I start to learn, I relearn Christmas carols on my bass guitar. And there's all this muscle memory, right? It's like my body remembers some of this stuff before my mind does. And there's times when my mind gets in the way all the time. And especially when I go to try to record it and I get nervous about recording, I play much poorer than I do when I'm just fooling around. And it's an interesting dynamic with the body. And it's like the fingers kind of know, the body kind of knows where that next tone should be coming from after a certain period of training. And my mind can just get in the way sometimes. It's just very interesting to me. So that's part of that mind body thing. So
that happens to so I play mandolin, and I can't tell you how the songs go. Like, if you just say what are the notes to Königsman's Rambles, I have no idea, but I can play it. And I have this thing with my teacher all the time. I go, I promise I practiced. I practiced. I don't know why I can't play it. And she goes, no. It happens all the time. It's like, this is the way it goes.
Yeah, if I get the first two notes right, I'm off and running.
Yeah.
but sometimes I have to poke around to find the first two notes.
I can name that tune. Yeah, it is weird. It's weird. And that really is a lot of the things in the subconscious come from practice. Like they really do become embodied. I mean, all of it truly is embodied. It doesn't appear that way to us. I mean, the quote where I was talking about the chair and how all the various information that's stored with chair in your brain, that there's not one part that knows the word chair and another part that knows how to sit in a chair. It's all wrapped up together.
This idea of the word versus the thing was something that was very current when I was in college. So this was really interesting to me, and I went off on a lot of independent study with the speech instructor about conceptualization and how we learn things and how we don't learn things. And so it was really a very hot topic, and it really blended in with my introduction to Buddhism at the time. But the word is not the thing. The thing exists. We put a word on it.
Talk about weird subconscious. I woke up this morning going, well, but Homo sapiens hasn't always had language. So what did our thoughts look like before language?
I noticed something about, I don't sleep that well, so I know I'm really aware of my dreams, right? So my dreams have these visual landscapes and very elaborate detail. But I noticed this week that everybody who talks in my dreams talks like I do. They use the same vocabulary, they use the same sentence structure. So I checked with another friend of mine who also has sleep issues, and she said the same thing. So this is obvious that this is your construction, because they're using language and speaking the same way you do. They don't have accents, they don't have dialects, even though they may be speaking appropriately to the character that I've projected, but they're still using my vocabulary, my sentence structure. So it's obvious it's my construction.
That's interesting. Oh, wow. Now we've really gone off on a tangent.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No. It's fine. Anyone else? We're getting here to the endish.
Yeah. My question on that is like, so I really like the analogy of consciousness being a spotlight on different thoughts, on different areas. And there's something doing the navigation. And it's like, my question is, what is that? There is some type of like focus, and you can shine that spotlight. What is it that shines the spotlight,
But I think his argument is that's not a good analogy, that it's better to think of it as an unfolding of, he likens it to like a fern frond uncurling.
But still, there's something that I don't know, there's some type of direction of awareness. And there's a navigation. In my experience, there's some type of
no. No, well, we have these metaphors because that is the way it appears to be. Yeah. Yeah, no, they work because they work. But he's like, but when you take the whole thing into consideration, that's why he's saying like, it's more like maybe it's even better to think of it as something that's it's uncurling under the sea, and then it breaks the surface and it unfolds, and we're just aware of the unbreaking of the surface, and it appears to us to be a certain way as it breaks the surface, but there's this whole part that's still underwater. That, I mean, I don't know, it's because you have to imagine then all the things you didn't direct the spotlight to, and where is that coming from? And that's coming from under the water, the subconscious. I mean, there's not even a backseat driver. I guess we are kind of backseat drivers. There's no driver. And we're kind of backseat drivers.
Yeah, yeah. There's no house builder.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It just feels like there's some agency's not a good word because it's more subtle than that. And that's where I'm at.
No, but it's good. Yeah. I mean, that's, yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, man.
Weird. That's all I can say is it's weird. I mean, it's weird. It's even weird. Like the thing that always like you are not looking out of your eyes. That's not what's happening. The light comes in, it gets actually turned into a sequential electrochemical signal, and your brain is constructing an image, and all of this is still happening inside your head. Yeah, that's the creepy one. Yeah, Bo.
Yeah, I just thinking about it, it is kind of weird that in Western society that like the body is just really not talked about a whole lot. Or like even in college, it's like, oh, it's a life of the mind.
Yeah.
You hear that all the time. And I think like I one point like truly believed like all of my suffering it's just because of my mind. It's like my mentality or like a choose happiness is I think kind of falls into that where it's like, oh, just choose happiness. It's like that easy. And yeah, just with this practice over, especially the last like 6 months and working with the body, I've just found it odd. And I don't know if there are instances in Western philosophy where somebody does talk about it and it's just not really well known. But it's just strange that it's like mind only and everything can just be figured out if you just read a lot and work on like control your thoughts.
Just control those thoughts.
Just
Bo.
control your thoughts. It's so strange.
Lift yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of and it's a little bit what I talked about in my Dharma talk when I was talking about Sapolsky. That's, I mean, obviously what we do today becomes input for the subconscious, conscious. I mean, it's all coming in and out of it, but there's just so much, like when you're talking to someone and at a subconscious level, your brain may have already decided that they look like somebody you knew in high school, and there can be this whole conversation going on underneath that you're never aware of it, and it could just slightly affect your mood and how you react to the person, and you're just never aware of that's the case. So that's kind of the other. And then the second thing is they're learning so much now about how the best thing you can do for your mind is exercise. So,
Well, I am going to cut in here a little bit because we're running out of time. There is that book out there that talks about trauma that's titled "The Body Keeps the Score."
yeah.
And, that's a pretty interesting one also. Anyway, thank you, Jushin. Stimulating talk, and thanks for all the engagement that we have had here. Anyway, that's going to wrap this one up. And what do I have here? Oh, so as I mentioned before, this is the last talk of the year. Nothing on Christmas and nothing on the New Year's weekend. And that means that January 7th will be the next talk. And that's Mark Anderson is going to be speaking on January 7th. And he will be followed by Kyoko, our good buddy. And then our friend Shoto Spring is going to be speaking the third week. And then Dokai is going to wrap up January with his own talk once he's back from the wilds of the South Pacific, right? So anyway, yes, I'm always supposed to talk about your support And there is a little link in the chat box there to where you could make a small donation if you're inclined in that direction. And I think that is going to wrap it up. We will close with the 4 vows. So, beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Hi, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.